And my kayak is on my phone. And that's what I saw.
Very nice.
Oh, thank you.
It's on my
Oh,
phone.
thanks for that.
Yeah. But I needed more. They have at least two.
Maybe
dinners.
I'll come back.
Okay.
This is not,
Cool, cool, cool.
whenever, is it on? Hello? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to bring the meeting to order, please. We have two very interesting things that we're going to be discussing today. So it's about 4:03, and I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole of August 22nd, 2023 to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Allen, Bates,
Dates here.
Berman,
Berman's here.
Doherty,
Here.
Davist, Ford, Gums, Iqbal,
Present.
Juby,
To be here.
Kenyon, Caius,
Is present.
Leonard, Lewis,
Lewis here.
Linder,
Linder here.
Molina,
Molina present.
Roth,
Roth here.
Sanchez, Silva,
Silva is here, remote
Strathman?
for informational purposes.
okay,
Strassen here.
Surgis, Tarver, Tepe,
Tepe here.
Williams, Young,
Young here.
Pirog.
I'm here.
You have a quorum in the room.
Alan is on the way. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, very good. On the way.
Bye-bye.
And
What good is that?
Mr. Young has a work-related issue, and Ms. Silva also has a request to be here remotely when she comes on because of a work-related issue. So do I have your consensus to allow them in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's simply for listening. Okay, very good. Thank you.
We can't vote on it.
No, but correct.
That's-
With the vote on minutes.
Madam
Aye.
Chair, I would ask for unanimous consent from the minutes.
Before we begin, we have to do the Pledge of Allegiance,
do we?
please, which Mr. Caius, you can do.
Oh, well. Call them up. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, we now move on to the approval of minutes of July 25th, 2023.
My apologies for jumping the gun. This is Caius. I would ask for unanimous consent for the minutes for May 23rd, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do we have a unanimous consent on this? I see no objections. Very good. We have some public comment, which is unusual and always welcomed for the Committee of the Whole. I believe we have two speakers today. The first speaker is Denise Gorlick, and this is going to be on agenda. Well, welcome.
Does that make a difference? That's all that.
Not at
counts.
all, not at all.
It's the master plan, but it's not the health department. Okay,
That would be off agenda.
that'd be off agenda. Okay. Denise Skorlik, I've lived in St. Charles for over 20 years. I'm talking reference the new master plan. The Kane County Board members will soon be voting on a construction of a new government center. White and Company, the architectural firm hired to analyze and assess the facilities master plan, has offered 5 site scenarios involving new construction that will cost taxpayers anywhere from $90 to $110 million. While I understand the need for modern and efficient government facilities, I believe that exploring all available options is essential before committing to such a significant financial investment. The August 9th Committee of the Whole meeting presentation lacked a comprehensive breakdown of the expenses linked to the proposed building projects. White and Company omitted a sophisticated cost analysis encompassing site preparation, infrastructure, design, planning, and construction. Additionally, there was no detailed exploration of potential tax revenue that might stem from the property leasing or selling. Given the current economic climate and the uncertainties it brings, it's crucial to consider alternative solutions that can fulfill the county's needs without burdening taxpayers. One alternative that merits serious consideration is renovating and repurposing existing structures. Empty buildings within the county could be retrofitted at less cost than new construction to accommodate the necessary functions of a government center. Engaging with the community is crucial during this decision-making process, yet citizens' awareness of the new construction project remains limited. Regrettably, the recent Committee of the Whole meeting failed to gather enough board members for a quorum, underscoring the urgency of addressing the issue. I believe soliciting public input is essential. Holding town hall meetings, conducting surveys, and involving citizens in the planning stage would ensure transparency and help identify innovative solutions that address the county's needs. Before moving forward with the proposed $110 million government center, take the time to evaluate all options available to Kane County thoroughly. By doing so, we can make a well-informed decision that benefits current and future generations while staying true to our commitment to living within our means. Thank you.
The next speaker, although it was proposed for September 26, Terry Lally. Did you want to speak today or did you want to speak in September?
No, I must have filled that sheet out wrong. Apologize. I'm on the same subject, but I'm well under 3 minutes. Following up what the lady in front of me just said. I just heard about this yesterday, so I don't have all the facts, but it seems to me that the board may be moving too quickly on making a final decision on where your facilities may be relocated. I'm not necessarily against the county becoming more efficient. But I believe that full due diligence and disclosure should be a requirement with this kind of expenditure. And that just cannot be, in my opinion, done moving at a faster pace. A few of my brief concerns. I think this was just mentioned. I haven't had a chance to look over your plan, but there's obviously going to be revenue bonds issued. I don't know what the rate is on those. I don't know what the debt service is going to be. We know the type of economic environment we're in right now. So that goes directly to what the future debt service might be. And of course, ultimately, are there going to be tax increases for the ratepayer at home, like myself? Should you relocate from this property, and that's interesting that this was just mentioned, because I personally would see this as a very viable alternative. Please keep in mind that depending on the asset class of the user that's coming in here, there may be some real problems getting financing. And before the county were to commit to an alternate site, please consider that there's a possibility that this facility here could end up vacant for a while. Again, depending on what the asset class is going to be for the end user. All right. Then finally, are you going to be more efficient? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a certain level of efficiency, but as a taxpayer, I think you're doing fine here. I'm not sure why I would care about that. I'm going to care about my taxes going up. Now, if you're going to be repurposing, or not repurposing, but if you're going to be umbrellaing current facilities that are off-site, and there's revenue savings, there's expense savings there, and then, revenue gains, that's great too. I just don't know what the facts are, but I just want you to know that myself and some other people who have a finance background will be watching this very closely. Thank you very much for your time.
And that does conclude our, I do not believe this. Oh, yes, sir. I don't. I'm not going to deny you. Are you, Denise and Terry? I don't have your names, sir.
Bill Roderick, Geneva. I'm on the east side of town with the bad roads.
Are you, just for clarification, are you going to be speaking off agenda or on?
On agenda.
On agenda. So then you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay. Appreciate the time to do this. Maybe I didn't sign up correctly. In looking at the proposal that's being considered, as a taxpayer and as a resident and all, it's
Are you
very
talking
troubling to
about
see
the
what,
health department?
pardon me?
Are you talking about the health department?
No,
Oh.
the plan
The
to
plan, so then
spend
it's,
money to 110 million.
then it's 3 minutes.
Let's take a look at the state of Illinois as it stands right now. Illinois is in first place out of 50 states when it comes to the cost of employees in the public sector. And Governor of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, just signed a bill that enhances the pay and benefits of the people that work for the state of Illinois, putting distance between whoever is in second place and ourselves. So we have the most costly workforce in the country. Illinois is also number one in terms of taxing entities. We have somewhere around 6,000, maybe as many as 8,000 taxing entities across the state of Illinois. No one knows how many there are, but they're out there collecting taxes. The actual count's not known, something for the board to perhaps explore and look into. Illinois is also number one out of 50 states in total state taxes and local taxes collected. We leave the country again in an area that is very troubling for the taxpayers who have to live here. With regard to the recent signing by Governor Pritzker, you may well be aware they were about to spend $1 billion for healthcare and other related benefits for illegals who are in the state of Illinois. We didn't invite them. but some we're incurring a significant cost to take care of them. We have 313 billion in pension debt, number one in the country for a state our size. Chicago, as a city, has 48 billion in pension debt, separate from the 313. And that debt, 48 billion is more than the pension debt of 44 states. So we're buried in red ink as a state as it is. We had 0.7% growth as a state last year, ranked among the bottom 5 in the country for growth in terms of the Illinois state economy. And finally, the report out by WirePoints last week, a great publication that hopefully many of you get their weekly or their daily emails. They got a lot of great information about Illinois. They report that from 1990 to 2022, the job market in the US grew by 43%. 43% more people getting paychecks than 30 years ago. Illinois didn't participate in that. Illinois from 1990 to present grew by 17% in terms of total jobs in the state of Illinois. We're lagging behind for a lot of reasons. When you pass taxes, you take money out of the private sector, and everything the private sector does with money creates jobs. So you get fewer job creations and fewer career opportunities for the people who live here. So there's a strategic impact when you make decisions about raising taxes on the private sector. I'll just conclude. We very much need tax relief. It's not much fun being the highest tax paid state in the country. It'd be great if you adopted some policies, got us down to number 5 or number 10 somewhere in the next few years. Things you could do and
Oh,
consider.
Sir, I'm sorry, your time is up.
I'll send this to you all if you like.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. You're welcome to come back to another meeting. All right, we are now on to our agenda items, and the first one is our budget forecasting. Oh, you don't have the PowerPoint?
The one tomorrow is the same one. Yeah. Okay.
I just heard a sigh of relief.
Hello, how's everybody? So while he's getting the slides, so I'm going to be giving just a very high level overview of I'm calling it the 2024 forecast. All the departments are currently in the process of working on putting together their 2024 budgets. No.
One tomorrow.
Today's. And
We're going to take a pause so we can get this powered up.
finance is on tomorrow morning.
You can switch. Have Roger go first. Maybe have Roger go first while they put that together.
American Family Insurance.
Oh. Maybe? You think he's giving everybody two?
Last Friday.
Because you're special.
I like this look, Mo. I like this moment.
I just sent it.
One play? Still gonna see.
What are they? Is it
Breakfast. Flip.
I want all the elephants.
Thanks, you, Mr.
We need those elephants.
It up?
Oh, now you know I'm grateful.
Animal crackers. It's donkeys and elephants. I'm just kidding. I hope.
Yeah, those elephants are pretty small.
Mine are all crushed.
There's a rhino.
I'm gluten free.
Now I got it.
Wait a minute, the slide.
Because of, because there aren't any horses in there, that's much.
2 servings.
I like casual.
No, I know. He looks good, doesn't he?
I got hungry.
I know, that's what I said.
Where? It's a new bowl. The new bowl.
I'll take a pass. Thank you.
Here's an elephant.
Look what their stock's done.
I know. Down, down, down.
All right, ladies, gentlemen, we're ready.
All right.
There it is. Let's go. Okay, thank you,
Uh,
Kathleen.
Sorry about that. So we're currently working on our budget process. Most of our departments, I would say, are about 75% of the way through. We did start late this year. So I'm giving, I'm calling it a high level financial forecast because we do not have the budget, the 2024 budget numbers set yet. And for those who attended the COW presentation a couple of weeks ago, the first couple of these slides are the same, but it's they're important to begin this whole discussion of the financial forecast, so I'm including them again. So when we're talking about putting together a budget, putting together a forecast for any organization, some of the key important things to consider: financial stability. What are some of the external forces putting pressures on our organization? What is the oversight of our organization and how are we performing? So for the county, our financial position and stability, things to consider. Are we providing services while balancing? Are we providing quality services while balancing revenues and expenses? Are we maintaining an adequate level of fund balance reserves? And the county's typical in the past goal is that we maintain 25% cash reserves in our general fund, general account. We need to consider liabilities, things that the county is liable for. What are the external forces putting pressure on our organization? Our public needs, laws, and mandates, and then the economic environment of recent years has been putting a lot of pressure on our organization. And then what are the oversight processes that we have here at this county that we utilize to manage our finances? We have good budget practices. There's state statutes and county codes which speak to things that we have to adhere to when we put together our budget and manage our finances. The county board is involved in reviewing and approving all of the expenses and including the budget and public comments and feedback. Performance and transparency. We include in our budget book metrics delineating for each of the functional areas of the county and departments, specific goals and objectives, outcomes that we're looking to achieve. And I'm encouraging departments to improve on pointing out the outcomes that they're achieving in their departments with the budgets that they have. And then we also have transparency in how we are using our resources through all of our committee meetings and agendas and presentations. This is a depiction I'm borrowing from my old public accounting career. This is how we used to look at organizations when we conducted audits. We looked at what are their core services, what are their resource management services that support those core services? What is the governance over the organization? So you can see, and I listed these in alphabetical order: core services, agriculture, development, elections, et cetera. And then our resource management functions that support all of those core services. On the left, external forces that put an impact on everything that we do. Obviously, economic development, federal and state funding has a big impact on everything that we do and what we're able to do. State laws change, federal funding becomes available. So it definitely impacts what we're able to accomplish. New laws, we have the Safety Act law that's now going to be put in place in a few weeks. That is having an operational impact on our organization. It's going to change workflow. It's going to change staffing needs, and then public needs. And then surrounding all of this is how are we measuring our performance against what we're called to do. We set goals and objectives. We create action items. We define outcomes in terms of what we're achieving and how we're achieving. And then circling around all of this, we're looking constantly to improve our practices so that we can do a better job in providing the services that we have. And we're constantly assessing risks. What do we need to be concerned about? What do we need to take care of? For the purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to focus in on the general fund. It's obviously the largest fund that the county has, and it's the main corporate fund. It houses most of our department personnel budgets. We do have some large departments like KDOT, for example, that their costs are not in the general fund. But the general fund is, I'm sure a lot of you from years on the board here, and for those who are new, it is sort of the main fund that we need to be concerned about. So, and the general fund, and I'll touch on this in a little bit. We have a general fund, and it's made up of 9 different separate accounts. The main account is the general account. So we have the general account of the general fund. So this is a trend line of actual spending and actual revenues through 2022. And then I have a forecast for 2023 and 2024, and it is a very conservative forecast for a couple of reasons, which I'll point out in a minute. So each one of those columns, those bars, represent the main types of revenue that come into the county. The one on the bottom, the lime green color, is property tax revenue. The second biggest amount are other taxes, and other taxes include the sales taxes, income taxes, personal property replacement tax. Those are the main pieces of those other taxes. And then we have the next sort of bar is charges for services. So those are the various fees that a lot of our departments charge. You go in, you pay a fee to get a copy of a document and the like. Then we have reimbursements, which are mainly grant type reimbursements that come into our organization. Then as we're getting up to the top, the smaller pieces of revenue, licenses and permits and fines. So as you can see over time, except for probably other taxes, all of the different revenue sources have been pretty much the same amount since 2014. They haven't really changed. So we're bringing in the same amount of revenue, but our expenses continue to go up through personnel and contractual services and commodities and capital items. But One thing I did want to point out for the 2023 and 2024 numbers, and I have a slide later to talk about this. We have several collective bargaining agreements that have expired as of 11/30/2022, which are still out. So those haven't been settled yet. And once they are, there will most likely be retro pay back to December 1st of 2022, which I do not have included in this 2023 estimate. We also have a number of contracts that are going to be expiring at the end of 11/30/2023, which I have not considered in our 2024 estimates. Typically, in looking through how the county has budgeted in the past, the county has typically not included collective bargaining estimates for collective bargaining salary increases in its upcoming year budgets. They've put a budget line item they've identified that emergency reserve funds will be used for any collective bargaining increase. That's typically how it's been done in the past.
If we have a question on the slide, can we ask if she's going along or?
It doesn't matter to me.
Yes, as long as they're brief, we don't kind of, so she can keep on moving along. There's two questions.
Surges. So on this screen here, I thought you were saying that this is just revenues, yet it's titled revenues and expenses.
Right, the expense line is the black line. And then the revenues are all
Okay.
the columns.
And then I believe last time you were here, we were talking just a bit about the COVID impact. So in this graph, the blue section in the middle, which is other taxes, seems to be the wild card or the biggest differential. And that seems to be 21, 2, 3, and 4.
Well-
Is that because we just have more taxes? The taxes are greater, or is that a COVID impact on that? What's your best
It's
guess?
mostly, it's gonna be the sales taxes, because they're tied to, obviously, the prices of general merchandise have increased, so the taxes on those items have increased, so our share has increased.
Okay.
And if I may, it's also the fact that in 22, I believe the law took place in 21, but in 22, if you buy something online, now we're getting the tax revenue for it.
So it's additional taxes.
It's additional taxes. Taxes that you would necessarily pay to the state are now being distributed locally because of the internet sales.
Thank you.
Yeah, in my look at, when I was looking at sales taxes to come up with an estimate for 2023, I mean, right now, unless something changes, it looks like these sales tax amounts and other taxes are going to come in just at about the same as they were in 2022. It's not a significant increase. Because I think inflation is starting to taper off a little bit.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
Can I
Caius.
ask this? Yeah, and speaking of inflation, that's kind of ties in with these. Is inflation is not factored in this? Does it affect the table we're looking at? or-
Well, it will because it affects the revenue that's coming in. So our share of sales taxes that is collected. So when you go to the store, an item that may a couple of years ago cost $1 is now going to cost maybe $2, whatever it is that you're buying. So the tax on that.
But the
has
same token,
increased.
everything we buy then is more expensive as well. So I wonder,
Right,
Just
so
how-
there's more sales tax revenue coming into us because the sales tax amounts that people
Right,
have to
so-
pay is higher because the merchandise that they're purchasing is.
They're in
costs
so
more.
adjusted for inflation, this would be a flatter line then, or?
No, this doesn't need to be adjusted. This is actual revenue. This is
Right.
actual receipts that have come into the county. Through 2022, this is actually, the number is right off of our audited financial statements.
I guess the point being, we're not deliberately spending more. We have to spend more, but we get more in, we have to spend more for the,
We're getting more sales tax revenue in
yeah.
in actual dollars because the amount of sales tax revenue that's being collected is higher because the cost of goods is higher.
Got it.
And we're spending more because of commodities and salaries.
Right.
Okay, yes. Ms.
Oh,
Bates.
thank you, Madam Chair. Bates, speaking. You said that when we do our collective bargaining, we do not usually put that in the budget and it just is paid for from emergency reserves. Do you consider that a best practice, or should we be predicting that and putting it into the budget, estimating approximately?
Yeah, it's definitely I would call it a budgetary tool or a budgetary technique that can be used since you're in negotiations and you don't know the outcome. It's definitely a budgetary tool that can be used, whether that's a best practice. It definitely, when you're trying to put together estimates like this, it hinders putting together an accurate, a more maybe closer to actual estimate.
Okay.
But I can understand why we probably haven't put an estimate since we're in negotiations.
All right. Okay. Mr. Iqbal?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. This graph, I'm a little confused. It shows that there's a surplus in last 2-3 years, but actually there was a deficit. We were in the hole, $10 million and $16 million, and we got it from the funds that we received, recently because of COVID. So it did show there's a surplus, but I want to know, how did you draw it? And number two, where is the CAC money and ARPA money shown in here?
The which money?
CAC.
The CARE Act.
The predecessor.
Oh, the
to
CARE,
CARES Act,
okay,
yeah.
yes. So for purposes of putting together this slide, so for accounting purposes, the salaries that have been reimbursed through CARES Act funds and ARPA funds, in our accounting, this is sort of the nitty gritty detail of the world of accounting, but in our accounting system, we're actually taking money from one fund and reimbursing it into another fund, and we are decreasing the salary expense line item by the amount of the CARES Act money and the ARPA money that's coming into the general fund. So for purposes of putting together this slide, I wanted to show the actual salary amount because the fact that we've had so much of our salaries reimbursed over the last couple of years by these federal funds, when you just look at our audited financial statements and you look at the general fund, it's skewed because we're netting out the CARES and ARPA funds from the salary line items. And we're showing it as transfers in and transfers out. So I took out those transfers for purposes of this slide to basically show the gross expense amount, because this is actually the expense amount. And I'm going to have another slide here in a second. Our general fund is composed of 9 accounts, and the COVID payroll reimbursement fund is actually one of those 9 accounts. So there's transfers going back and forth between those accounts. But the COVID payroll account is really just a temporary account that we set up to push all of our reimbursed salary amounts into. So I hope I've answered your
No,
question.
Not clear.
We can explain that later on.
This,
But I think it's time
okay.
to go on to the next
All right.
slide. I think it may be helpful.
Yeah, later on, yeah.
okay. So there are 9 accounts that are part of our general fund. The main one is the general corporate account, which is basically where 90%, maybe even more of the activity occurs. And then over the years, the county has set up various other accounts. So you often hear people refer to the special reserve people call it a fund, the special reserve fund or the emergency reserve fund or the property tax freeze protection funds. These aren't really funds, they're accounts. And they were set up by the county as a way of putting money aside in a reserve so that when they put together the budget and they're looking at the general fund and general account, they can use that fund balance and maintain that fund balance, and any surplus. In fact, what the county does every year at year end, and we just did it at 11/30/22, is any surplus over, it's about an amount roughly around 50 million, anything that any surplus funds that are going to increase the county's general account balance over this $50 million amount, we slide over into the special reserve fund. Because when I put together this slide, I was, if you notice that's a slide coming up. But the general account balance is the same year after year after year. And that's because any surplus we move into one of these other reserve funds. You'll also see on here that the COVID payroll reimbursement account is also part of the general fund, which again, these are all accounts that the county board has established over the years as a way of segregating funds, monies into separate accounts for budgetary and other purposes. So of those 9 accounts that are part of the general fund, this is the composition of our general fund. So this is the general fund, all 9 accounts. And as you can see, the general account, which is that the blue, the general account has been the same since 2014. And that is because at the end of the year, we clear out any surplus revenues over expenses, and we move them into one of these other accounts. So the last 3 years have had a lot of changes to our general fund balance. In 2020 through 2022, and it'll continue in 2023, we've had the CARES Act funds and the ARPA funds reimburse significant salaries of significant staff salaries. Just this last, for 11/30/22, fiscal 2022, we had close to, I think it's around $20 million in salary reimbursements from the ARPA funds. So that has added to our fund balance. In 2020, everything that exceeded the general account balance, the county put into its special reserve fund. And that basically represents the CARES Act reimbursements. And I shouldn't say that it represents CARES Act reimbursements. It represents the savings that the county was able to obtain because they had salaries reimbursed by federal funding. They didn't have to use their regular revenue sources. So the county saved money. In 2021, the county decided to create the COVID payroll reimbursement account. So everything that was in special reserve was used up as part of 2021. And then the county decided to continue to put any salary reimbursement amounts from ARPA funds mainly. There are some CARES Act funds in there too, but going forward, it's ARPA into this account. This is not unusual. I've looked at all the surrounding counties. This is not unusual that our fund balances, our general fund balances have increased. And it's because we've all been receiving the CARES and the ARPA fund monies. So the county had generally just kind of, when you're looking at the numbers, the county's general fund balance has been around $60 million. It's at year end 2022, it's at $98 million. So this is just a history of property taxes, property tax levies that have been extended over the years. And the county has not, except for new construction, has not raised property taxes since back to 2012. I believe back in 2017, the county started adding new construction as part of their tax extension. So that's why you see the slight increases over the years. You will notice, though, that we, even though the rate is the same, the county is able to, within all of its different funds that we levy a property tax, we can increase one up, decrease another one down, as long as in total we don't go over. So that's why you see some differences from year to year, where the insurance liability fund may have a higher levy one year versus another fund. Several people have asked for like a long-term trend line of taxes, and this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago. This one goes back to 2017, the beginning of fiscal 2018. This is just a trend line of the revenue that's been coming in to the general fund. And as you can see, the number one, and this is, these are taxes, not including property taxes. So the single biggest contributor is the sales tax. And the other taxes are maybe the, I think it's the income tax is the second largest, but clearly the sales tax is the number one. And I call the way that it, the line moves, I call it like a heartbeat, because it goes up right before Christmas and then comes down. And we are receiving the taxes, 2 months after they're collected. So this is a slide as I'm analyzing salaries. This is a slide of all the salaries, just salaries, not benefits, and not overtime. This is just salaries in all of our general fund, general accounts since 2019. And you can see the increases from year to year, beginning in 2019 to 2022. They went up 8.62%. From 2020 to 2021, they were pretty flat. From 2021 to 2022, they're up 10%. And from 2022 to 2023, and this 2023 is really just an estimate again, because we don't have, I'm not including an estimate for any contracts that are out as part of negotiations, collective bargaining agreements, is up 5%. And you can see the changes in between departments. And I would caution, as you look at these percent increases from department to from one department to another department, an increase of, one person in a very small department can be a very significant percent increase. So please consider both the amount and the percent. So this is a slide of our collective bargaining units. We have 15 collective bargaining contracts at the county. The ones in the light yellow are currently, they're in negotiations, they're out for bargaining, they've expired. There are a couple of the contracts, even though they've expired, The contracts allow for step increases, so there are employees in some of these contracts who continue to, they will get a step increase. But once they reach the top step, they can't go any further. That's part of the contract negotiations. And then we have 3 more contracts that are going to be expiring in a few months here. And then the rest have been recently negotiated. So part of, today's presentation, and Roger's going to be coming up after me to talk about, the county has had discussions about various capital projects, because it's been a long time since the county has improved its, significantly improved some of its facilities. And there are some facilities that are in need of assistance. So when you're looking at the capital funding options, what is in the county's control? The county has property tax revenues under its control. There's locally controlled tax revenues such as the local option motor fuel tax, the RTA transportation sales tax. The county board can control how it is allocated to the various departments in the county, what portion goes to transportation, what portion goes to public safety. There's ARPA funds, which potentially can be used for some capital expansion. And then financing, we can, which is not really funding, but it's just a way of, for cash flow purposes, funding construction. And I will say back to this beginning slide. I lost it. This slide. I did want to point out a couple things in terms of, when the county's thinking about general operations, balancing revenues and expenses for just general operations versus capital projects. So in taking a look at this slide, so for the 2022 budget, the county budgeted $102 million in the general fund, general account in expenses. Of that amount, the county budgeted 97 million in revenue, and they were going to make up the difference between the expenses and the revenue of the new revenue by taking 4.8 million from fund balance. The county ended up, so the county budgeted 102 million in expenses. The county ended up 2022 with 95 million. So a little less. So the county ended up with, as you look at that line, just enough revenue to cover the expenses. For 2023, the county budgeted in its general fund, the county budgeted 123 million. So up from 102 in 2022, the county budgeted 123 million in expenses. They budgeted $106 million in new revenue. And the county budgeted $17 million in fund balance to balance out the expenses. So based on, estimates to date of where the county might end up in its general fund, we might end up just at the same point with, I'm guessing, somewhere around 105 million in expenses and about 106 million in new revenues. So the county wasn't utilizing fund balance. So if you think about this going forward for 2024, you might expect, and again, this is a truly conservative budget, the county might expect a 2024 budget with, annual salary increases and collective bargaining unit salary increases, a budget higher than 123. The revenue is not growing at the same rate. So the county would once again have to most likely dip into its fund balance to borrow money to pay for the upcoming year's expenses, which is something that can be done, surely. But also if the county is going to be doing capital projects, and also for the long term, if you look back at this slide, and the county's fund balance. So the county has, typically maintained a pretty even fund balance and is right now benefiting from the CARES and the ARPA Act funds. If you put a 2024 budget together and just took this excess money from the fund balance, in probably about 2.5 to 3 years, you'd be back down to the levels that had existed from 2014 to 2019. And the county we do need to maintain a certain level of fund balance for cash flow purposes and emergency reserves. So if you borrowed too much from your fund balance and you didn't do anything about new revenues, in about 2-3 years, the gap that you would have to make up would be even greater. Again, just in terms of good fiscal management, I'm pointing these things out to the board for your consideration. And if you have any more questions.
Are there any questions from anybody? Mr. Tepe?
Yeah, Kathy, this includes all of the ARPA funds that are currently being held?
No, this is just the ARPA funds that have reimbursed salaries of the general fund. The ARPA fund is a separate fund that money can be used. It has been used. There's all sorts of eligibility uses for those funds. It can be used for special projects, for capital. Some of it we're using to reimburse expenses, salary expenses.
Is there anybody else? You good? Mr. Iqbal, one more question?
Yeah, well, this graph is very, very good. It tells us that there are $38 million left in the COVID or other funds. And you're telling us that it will take us 2-3 years to deplete those funds.
Well, if you look at back at new revenues, and I think my predecessor, Joe Onzik, tried to make the same case last year, because when we put together the 2023 budget, we had to use $17 million of fund balance to balance the budget, meaning we had more expenses than revenues. And in order to do that, we had to dip into our, call it fund balance, retained earnings for, private sector talk. We had to dip into that. So with, we have this excess right now because of the COVID salary reimbursements. But a 2024 budget, we might need to borrow 20 million of our fund balance to balance out expenses. And the next year, we would probably need a little more. And so in 2.5 years, that 98 million, which is what we have at the end of 2022, you're back down to where it's been.
Yeah.
And then the budget year after that, where are you going to get
Okay.
the difference to balance the budget? So you would have to start dipping into your fund balance further than you've probably gone before.
If you don't have enough money, I think anybody in corporation knows this. If you don't have enough revenue, you do layoffs.
Yeah,
So
Madam
it's
Chair, the
reduction of
problem is the expenditure are out of control.
The
You
expenses
look at the
are,
department,
the
you
expenses
look at the
are,
departments.
oh, no, I agree. The
Yeah.
expenses are under the board's authority.
Madam Chair.
Okay, now we have many questions. Yes.
Bates, where did that 17 million, which fund did the $17 million come from?
When we balanced the 2023 budget, it mainly came from the COVID payroll reimbursement account of one of the 9 accounts in the general fund.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Sturgis.
Kathy, in the yellow section there, is that the interest? Am I not seeing?
No,
that right?
this is the fund, this is the composition of the fund balance. So this is what
Sorry,
may,
go to the other,
yeah, the revenues and expenses.
that one. I'm sorry, whatever the third down is that.
No, the color that's third from the bottom is charges for services. Interest revenue is a very small piece.
Okay,
very
Is-
tiny.
Yeah, okay, that's, so you can't even see it.
You
it's so
can't even
small.
see it.
And how, I guess the question is, how do you see in magnitude what we're gaining in interest there? And where is the ARPA money interest, if any? How do we put a flashlight on that or a magnifying glass on that? Is
So the,
that in this, or is that in a separate dealio?
well, the interest that is earned on the counties, on the bank accounts that belong to Kane County are allocated across all of the funds. The county has 176 funds, I believe. It's allocated across all the funds based on that fund's balance as a percent of the total balance. So ARPA is just one of those funds, and they have a significant cash balance. So they are allocated their percent of interest based on the bank accounts that hold their.
If I can rephrase that question, then could we please get a slide that shows us this type of history showing what our interest has done
Sure.
on this? Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I must admit, we're a little behind just because the allocation of the interest is on the finance department. Just in terms of the transition, and it's probably going to take
2 months,
us,
I mean-
it probably will take us about 2 months to get up to date. I can get you through 2022. Very soon, very soon.
Any other questions? All right, very good. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
I hope you found this helpful. We'll be bringing it back tomorrow to finance, because I know it's pretty much depth, and I think it considers taking a look at it several times. All right, welcome, Roger.
All right. So we'll give Blair a second to switch slides.
Do you have a handout for us?
No, no handouts. We're just going to go through this online. So there's a couple of things we're going to cover. One is an update on the facilities master plan. It's just going to talk about where we're at in the process. Many of you joined us for the committee of the whole, where we went through different sites, scenarios, and some of the options. There's a lot of discussion, but we're getting closer to the final approach for what a plan would look like. And that's a policy decision for the board. So we're talking about how do you come up with the ideas, ranking them, the technical merit of ideas, and then ultimately the policy decision comes back to the county board. In addition to that, I'm going to talk briefly kind of about the schedule going forward, where we're at with it, and then a survey that we're looking to do to get some additional feedback from the county board, department heads, elected officials. Then the last piece, we're going to talk about the health department and some of the things that we're doing related to the health department's building and facilities and some of the potential options that we have and what we're looking at with that. So with that, we'll get started with the presentation that we have. So right now you're in part 3 of this plan, which is really the finalizing the recommendations. I use the word recommendations. Jason Dwyer, he's with White and Company, has been leading us through this master planning process. He's online with us, I believe, still. I don't think we'll need him for this conversation, but he is available if we have some questions for him. So we've been going through this process. We're making that final approach to, what is the recommendation or recommendations plural about the plan, and what will be the board's position as far as a policy to formulate the plan going forward. Again, this plan is something that you're looking for the next 20, 30 years as far as the time frame or the horizon of it. It's not something that you're going to necessarily finish in 1 year. It's not a one big bite. It's a process. It's a planning and guidance document for what the board intends to do over the next, like I said, 10 to 30 years. So with that, this is some of the work that's gone into this process. We've done space needs assessments in 2021, which was take the current and existing staffing for offices and departments and compare it to statistical information from CMAP and other sources, talking with interviews with the departments. Where are they going to be at as you go through the years incrementally, in 2025, 2030, all the way out to 2050? And they also looked at the condition assessments of the buildings in 2015 and 2022. And those were telling us kind of the envelope of the building, all the different attributes of the building, mechanical systems, basically every aspect of the building, what's the condition of it, and what types of repairs are needed. We went through this last year with White and Company, and just kind of off the top of my head, the notes were 5 years of short-term and immediate repairs that needed to be done and about $25 million worth of work. And that what came out of the condition assessments. During the budget process and admin committee, we worked with the county board to try to do a 5-year plan where we would, pace ourselves $5 million a year for 5 years to see how much we could catch up. But that's kind of the work of the space needs assessment, the facilities condition assessments. There was also an accessibility assessment done in 2014 and 2015. We've been using that information to help us understand some of the conditions within the buildings that were identified even as long ago as 2015 and still have the same issues today.
Bless you.
Sorry, sir. So, we completed all of these different pieces of homework, and now those are kind of the pieces that formulate what will go into the master plan. So we went through all of that data with White and Company. We've had a couple meetings to discuss scenarios. We completed the initial site recommendations, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and then the scenario recommendations that we'll also talk about. So site is the location, scenario is kind of what types of buildings and what types of services are we looking to put in different locations. Again, we did the committee of the whole review on August 9th and had a good discussion. We're finalizing that policy recommendation for the board to consider, and you're going to have options. You're going to get to decide what you think is the best plan going forward. We are going to try to survey the board, the officials, and the department heads just to give you some balance and feedback from everybody so you can kind of see and gauge what people are thinking. This doesn't make a decision. It doesn't make any type of a firm contractual obligation or anything like that. You're just getting to see what other people are thinking before you make your own policy decision. So in the survey, we're going to ask you about the 3 sites. This was what we discussed at the COW meeting on August 9th. There's the Fabian Parkway site, Judicial Center site, and the Government Center site. Specifically related to the Government Center location, we're going to ask you whether or not you think that one of these sites is more preferable than another. So you'll be able to click on the up arrows and down arrows and tell us which site you think the Government Center should be located at. You can also drag and drop the choices to the top of the list. So if you click on Fabian, campus, you can drag it to the top and it'll become your #1 choice, or Government Center. Whichever one you put at the top is the highest ranked choice. So we're going to be asking those questions. We're going to also look at the different scenarios for the Government Center. At the meeting on the 9th, there was a discussion about, well, there's 3 options for the Government Center. So if if you're doing cumulative voting, it doesn't come out necessarily fairly. So in the first slide, we just ask you which site, and the second one, regardless of which site you picked, we want you to tell us your preferences about the Government Center site. Do you keep the boardroom intact while you're building? Do you replace the boardroom, or do you do all new? Those are the kind of 3 options that were discussed at the meeting. We just want to get feedback from everybody about what their preference is regarding this site specifically. So, and then the last one is priorities. What's the priority? We've kind of had these 4 topics come up over and over: the health department, the Judicial Center, judicial facilities expansion, the Government Center and public services expansion. That's this campus, and then satellite offices. Those are kind of the different areas. There's a few others that we'll talk about, but we added an other category if it's not one of those. But we're going to be asking everyone about those questions as well, just trying to get an understanding of where people are at in terms of what they think is a priority. This is all opinion. It's about what you think and what you think the policy should be. And then it's to give you some feedback as well. So these are the scenarios that were discussed at the meeting. There's A and B, which are Fabian and Judicial Center. And then the bottom 3 are all versions of the Government Center campus being used in different ways. So one is keeping the boardroom intact. One's replacing the boardroom and the other is replacing the entire building and starting over. So those were the scenarios that were provided for the long term. So some of the upcoming key dates, we are in that third phase of the planning process. And we had August 22nd as the committee of the whole for final option selection. We're a little bit behind that right now. We're working on that. We want to get some of this other information together, make sure that we have a good recommendation for the board. We'll be discussing that at administration committee on September 13th. But it will be coming soon where we'll be presenting it to the board with recommendations and as much guidance and information as we can. And then ultimately the policy decision makers will tell us what they want in their master plan. The original goal was to have it adopted in October. So October 10th, that's where we're still trying to target. Yeah, I think we can stop there. If there's any questions about the master planning process, I just wanted to give a quick update from the committee of the whole that was held on August 9th. So everybody kind of knows what's going on. The survey that we're talking about will be going out in an email. It's an online survey through email. You can click through it at your leisure, do it whenever you're ready. Heidi Files is orchestrating that. She'll be sending it out. I think we'll be getting it out hopefully before the end of this week. So.
Are there any questions? Yes, Ms. Bates.
Sure.
Bates speaking. The needs assessment, what, do you know what square feet we think we need compared to what we have today?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. That's different for the government center versus the judicial center. I have it later in the slides. If you want to get a specific answer, I could probably get it to you. Let me see if I can flip through far enough. I'll spoil all the slides, right? No, just kidding. It's a judicial center. I put these in just in case I had this question. So this is square footage for various offices in government. So if you look at the bottom, existing 162, let's see, we're at in 2021, we're at 146,540. And they're saying we need another, I'm gonna say 30,000 square feet additional space just for the offices.
The 150 to up to 175?
Yeah, 150 to 175, 30,000 square feet, 7.3%.
How much?
Says 7.3% on the
Increase?
lower right, change from 2021 to 2050.
And
That's-
is that based on input from our directors and the?
Yeah, there
we've been working
was an interview process and White conducted the space study with the square footage. And they used some other industry metrics that they apply to it to calculate the growth of population, the growth of services, some industry trends that are applied to it, but that's what they're recommending. Now, this is just the government center though. This is not judicial.
Right.
So
But
I have
so-
that too.
Oh, so based on the population estimates, as those vary up and down with reality,
Yeah.
that could change our,
It could change your demands that are on you right now. I think the projection is to go from 516,000 people to roughly 640, I think 650,000. So 20%.
because CMAP has already greatly reduced their estimate model,
Yeah.
correct?
Mhm.
So
They
could
did.
that happen again?
It could go up, it could go down.
Go up or
I,
down,
yeah,
yes.
I think that's just, kind of good guidance from the, development community.
Okay.
Most agencies refer to CMAP for their population data, but I have that.
No different than they would do with school districts.
Yeah.
As you know, they project how many children are born. They take a very careful look on how much the population has grown within the district and per year and
West
forecast it out.
West Aurora built a high school that
Sure.
they never needed 20 years ago,
Understood.
30 years ago. So
Yeah.
sometimes those demographics just have to be
Yeah.
watched more carefully.
Yes, Mr. Sturgis.
Sturgis, I just, first, Roger, I appreciate the thoroughness that you're going through with all this
Sure.
and your ability to bring it down at least to my level where we can understand it and kind of, bite-size this. But I am really beginning to feel some, as we near a deadline, some pressure here that this is going in tandem with budget figures where we're saying, here's doom and gloom on a budget that we can't honor yet, or we're going to struggle to honor, let me put it that way, versus here's buildings, big and shiny and new that we want to do for, $100 to $120 million. And where is that money coming from? And yet, on the other hand, there's this reality that there's going to be some growth. And then there's the reality of, hey, Springfield says there's certain mandates that need to happen and you just flat out don't have the room to make everything happen. And I gotta be candid, I'm trying to get on board with the enthusiasm, yet I am really stuck in the reality of what is it truly that we need to make work, and what's that look like compared to the big new shiny, and I'm struggling with that. I am really struggling with that. And, the other day it's, as a salesperson, I love the assumed sale. It's my favorite thing. And the other day at the country club, it was so nice to say, we're not asking you if you need any of this. We're asking you which one you like. And I don't like any of them if I can't afford it. And I don't know that we have the bonding ability, although we're pretty stellar. If we can't do it, it can't be done. On the other hand, just because we can doesn't mean we should, unless you can prove, at least to me, that there is an absolute need to do this. And that's, I just want to be candid with you. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Sure.
Is to say, and that's without getting into the emotions of, oh my gosh, I want to save building A and this beautiful, former, religious institution as a museum for us while we go do something else. And how do we logistically build another campus while we're, wait, slow down. What are you telling me we need and when do we need it by? And how are we paying for that first?
Okay.
And I just want to acknowledge that bias that I'm having trouble with to you.
Sure.
So that maybe conversationally, we can begin working our way through some of that a little bit. So,
And if I can, may I respond?
absolutely.
I think it's important, and one of the reasons we're doing this exercise is to get a plan forward. So that as we look, this is not going to be, as was mentioned earlier, this is a long-term consideration for the county that's going to impact not just your tenure here, Mr. Surges, because we're all eventually going to be leaving these opportunities to go on to do other things. But it'll have a pathway forward for new boards, for new decision, new revenue, or not new revenue. But certainly the one thing that we do know is going to be happening, because it's going to happen, is the county is going to increase its population. And with increase in population, there's going to be an increase of services needed. But there's going to be additional people. And where are we going to put those individuals? Whether it's two more people on a staff that there's no room for, or 10 more, or much more, as in consider the state's attorney with her requests. Literally, where are these people going to be placed? And these are things that we have to consider. So it is a plan forward. Very much, I would say it, and excuse this analogy, but it's the best one I can think of on the fly, is when you have a child and that child is born, and you may start setting away a savings account for that child's future. You don't know what the future is going to be, and you don't know how much it's going to cost, but you've got a plan forward for that child. So this is, in my estimation, potentially similar to that, and that kind of ill-formed analogy is that we're planning a pathway forward so that we can see what is going to be needed and how we can address our financial planning to meet potential goals. So that's the intent. Yes, yes, sir.
This is Caius. I like your analogy. With my thought was, though, it's more like me or you who are planning for retirement. We're going to be retiring. You're probably planning your retirement in the future, right? But the county's never going to retire. It's going to be here long after we're gone. So, and I'm with you on this. Do we do this? Do we don't do that? But if we don't have something we can look at for the long term, in 20 years, we won't know what kind of retirement we have for the next 10 or 20 years, let alone for the next 100 years. So it's just a kind of a broad roadmap of where we can go, but not that we have to. I know our speakers today said, well, we're going to spend $120 million. Well, maybe we will down the way, That may be what is required, but maybe not. I think, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Berman, don't you feel that 50 years ago when they purchased this building, they went through the same discussions that we're going through? Same planning, the same thinking about the future, what it's going to be? So it's nothing that, it's not the first time we've sat down and decided that we need something in the future. But we've got to decide now for what our future is going to be. And, we can talk about, do we have enough money or don't we have enough money? But gosh, if you look at our tax levy since 2014 is flat. So here we are, 20 years, we haven't increased taxes in a bit. People claim about taxes going up, but they sure as hell hasn't been here at the county that they've gone up. It's other places. But I think we went through the same discussion. We had to have gone through the same discussion with the same ideas 50 years ago. And the decision was made at that point in time to do something. And I guess we can sit back and say, oh, we're not going to do anything. But 50 years from now, somebody's going to look back and say, well, why didn't you do something? So that's just my opinion. We've gone through it before.
Yes, Roger.
Just, to follow along that, not to age myself, but I've been with the county for 21 years. In 21 years, I've watched the county build over $100 million worth of buildings. I don't know if, that resonates with people, but in 20 years, we've built that much in buildings just while I've been here. And it actually was a result of planning like this. The Judicial Center campus where we built the new jail in 2008 was a result of master planning, said build the jail there. The actual coroner's office multi-purpose building was a little variation on the plan, but it was actually on the master plan to put sheriff's parking annex and a coroner where we put it on the plan. So those are two examples. We also renovated 540 Randall, which is the circuit clerk traffic court in Branch Court. So that was another big project that we've invested, I think, millions of dollars in the course of the last 20 years, not to mention, a new animal control building, a new qualification range at the sheriff's office. There's a lot of construction projects that have been done, and pursued throughout the 20 years, $100 million. So when you look at it over a 20-year horizon, it is not as, difficult to comprehend as you may think, instant kind of gratification of doing a building. So just wanted to add that.
Mr. Iqbal, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have quite a few questions, actually. I agree with Mr. Sturgis that we are going too fast. And I agree with the other speakers that we need to have this discussion. The problem is, I think we are going too fast. We do need the planning, but there's a way to plan. And I look at U46, which is the biggest district. When they have a problem, they rent temporary classrooms. And
They have trailers that they put in yards.
and then they make the buildings. So they know, what real demand is. We don't have a real demand. We don't have that people sitting in the mobile home or anything. We can rent place if we go forward, if we need it. But we don't need it any place anytime soon that we need to rent some things out. And we are planning for something, talking about demolishing this building and board not meeting and all. These are kind of very far-fetched scenarios, which we should not be discussing. The main thing is, this is a good building. We need some ADA requirements. We need some more facilities here and work on those and put the money, ARPA money to finance it.
All right, that is your opinion. Ms. Molina?
Mr. Iqbal, if I can address that a little bit. Currently, we have our OEM department who is out of space, and our director, because she doesn't fit in her own office, has had to move across the way because there is no room in her. So we don't have a trailer, but we have a director who is not able to be in the same space with her employees because the space is not there anymore. That's just one example. And as the chair of public, the chair of the judicial, I have to mention that. I'm sure our health director also has examples of how his employees do not fit in the space currently. I understand the long-term need, but there is short-term needs, and we need to address that. We need to do better for our employees and provide them the services and the environment in which to work properly for our constituents.
And I would echo what Ms. Molina says, and this is based not on hypothesis, but on reality. If you've gone over to our courts and see how our state's attorneys are working elbow to elbow, there's absolutely no room for them, especially now with the mandate with privacy of looking at videos to decide court cases because of the Safety Act. They literally have no room. And that building is filled to capacity. So where are we going to put them? We are in a space crunch. Yes, possibly we could rent another room for them, but I've heard concerns because of security. Because we want to make sure that our attorneys are secure so that people who may have an issue with decision-making that's coming through the courts, it is this day and age. So yes, and the same thing, had those discussions when I was on the school board. We never liked, because of lack of security at schools, to put children out on trailers. Yes, it's a temporary solution to solve a long-term need, but the security of trailers, they're unsecure facilities. They truly are. And I think you realize that. So yes, it's an economic move that makes sense, but it's not a sense that makes good sense for people. So don't mean to get on a soapbox. My apologies.
It was the kid safety thing that got you. I think, Bates, again, is it safe to say that this plan is something that will be kept safely in a on a desk somewhere or in a vault for the day that we feel that we can afford this and that it's needed? So this is, well, to go back to Mr. Caius's analogy of planning for your retirement, this is, I believe, an exercise in what might be the best solution down the road, but not something that we're going to start doing tomorrow.
So I would say that the planning that we're trying to do is going to be a living document that you revisit as you go through your fiscal process. So if you do an annual budget, finance, Kathy Hopkinson, we've talked about strategic planning, we've talked about capital planning, we've talked about programs and services, staffing planning with HR. All of these things that you're using as planning documents help guide your policy and your decisions and the things. So as a department head or a staff member, I go back to those plans to say, what is it that the board established as their plan for the direction they want to go in? So the land use plan, when you look at it, it says we don't build, industrial warehouses out in the farm because that was not our plan. Right? So we use those as our guidance to try to follow the policy that the board establishes. And we want to do that, regularly revisit. And if the board changes how they want to plan or how they want to do things, they would vote to change their policy. And I think that's healthy. It's a good thing to review annually. We've been working through our building management and project services to try and make sure that we can evaluate those plans regularly. I think you don't want it to become shelfware where it just sits. And I think the last plan, even though we didn't build the judicial center expansion and add on to the judicial center, it was used over time, multiple times to determine how we're best going to, the traffic court at Randall Road actually originated out of the last time we did the facility master plan. It was, how do you alleviate and use a kind of another building to avoid the construction of the massive judicial center campus. And we worked to alleviate traffic court by moving it to Randall Road. And it was maybe a compromise, and it was something that was planned out and worked out. So things do come up, there are opportunities, but you have to have something that guides what people are trying to work on.
Okay, thank you. But I think some of the anxiety on the part of the board is that we're coming up with some good ideas, but we don't feel like we can afford them until we get our house in order.
Okay.
So let's,
Yeah.
I just think people can say
We're not
we'll
at
get our house
closing
in
yet.
order, and then we'll think about spending.
Davis, the anxiety is the deadlines. As
Well,
if
these
there's a
deadlines are
deadline
not
for
when we're gonna
action.
do,
So-
this deadline about picking our best option does not have anything to do with the deadline for the date we're gonna break ground. It's
And that's,
completely separate,
and if
correct?
you miss that sarcasm, that was the point. There's,
Okay.
there's a bigger fish to fry right now
Mhm.
than this
Mhm.
deadline that will be with us till retirement.
Right.
I just don't, my point was I was feeling a little bit of pressure of one on top of the other. And I can very easily discriminate which one is more important than the other in a short period of time.
And
Not for a,
may we keep?
And I would like, because it's 5:30 and we have not brought forward to the topic at hand, which is the
Yes.
health department.
Okay,
So why don't we, if
I'll
we
be
can
around
jump ahead
after
to
the
the
meeting
health
if you wanna-
department. This conversation, I think,
Sure.
our public speakers spoke well on this.
Sure.
This we could talk about for a long period of time to have this
Absolutely.
discussion. But let's talk about something that we know is important to many people to hear about the health department.
So we are continuing to pursue and work with the health department regarding their building. We are revising and working on plans related to what an application for ARPA would look like, or funding opportunities for how you would look at three options: renovating the existing building and expanding. They're again at like 20,000 square feet. They probably need 10 to 15,000 square feet of space.
would you repeat that number, please? I'm sorry to,
The health
but
department,
they have how much
they're,
now?
they're
How
at about
much?
20,000, I think, square feet.
20,000, and they're gonna need,
Yes, Miss, if you look on the
It's in
slide
the
right there.
item number
on that
6,
deck.
I think.
okay,
Yeah.
thank
so
you.
we're trying to work through this though, to renovate the existing building and some expansion. There's purchasing and renovating a building that was mentioned. Then there's new built specifically for the health department, which was also looked at. So we're completing an ARPA application, which involves kind of how do you go about making those recommendations, considering the funding options. There's some cost benefit analysis that we're trying to prepare between if you try to renovate a building, and I know there's been discussion about renovating a space, renovating the existing space, or buying a building and renovating a space. Depending on the requirements for the building, you have to remember that we have to build according to certain government standards that we cannot avoid or ignore. And what ends up happening is we have to do a lot of demolition and a lot of make ready to build out the ADA, the fire, the public access, all the office spaces. So demolition and renovation come hand in hand. Right now, we're doing renovation projects. They have ranged, just round numbers, $600 to $700 a square foot for renovation in an existing building. So 1,000 square feet renovation turns into $600,000 worth of work. You look at those types of numbers, and renovation involved with making it come up to code and making sure you have accessibility and all the public access, fire suppression, redoing mechanical HVAC systems in spaces that don't have it. All of those things come into play, restrooms, you name it. I mean, it gets expensive to renovate these old buildings. It's not that we're not looking at it. It's just fact of the industry. So we're looking at the ARPA application and what that would entail. We're looking at the building size needing to increase by 10,000 square feet at a minimum, probably maybe up to 15,000, depending on programs and services, which we're working with Michael Isaacson from the health department, trying to get a better handle on that. So ultimately 30 to 35,000 square feet by 2050. And a lot of that number comes in the first half of the period of time. So, again, there's 21 new employees that are projected. I think there's about 70 employees now, and it goes up to 90 some employees during that time period. And that's provided that we don't really change our programs and services much. It's just the growth that's going on. If we add programs and services, which we'll talk about in a second, that can change more drastically. This kind of coincides with the 20% increase in population that we're going to probably experience based on projections. So the initial cost estimates that we worked on with White, still for the health department, new construction was 25 to 32.7 million. And I believe that the renovation of existing and expansion was just short of the 25 million, somewhere in that range. We're going to be sharpening those numbers up to give you some side-by-side comparisons as we go through the ARPA application and the cost benefit.
And as you go through this and the new programs and services, when you take a look at the amount of people that we have working in the health department compared to other counties, we are incredibly modest. We do not provide direct services. Those were cut, I think, probably about 15 years ago. So right now we have dispersed all of that. So where other counties have several hundred to up to 900 employees just for their health department, we have, what is it, 70?
73, I think. 73.
So this is not a big department. We are not bloated with personnel in this department by any means at all. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, Surges, with the two comments that I've made prior to this, I just want to make sure that I lay this out here. This one is an urgency. The conditions that this team under Mr. Isaacson have to work under are deplorable.
Thank you.
And we can't, how do we get $200 million from a COVID disaster, health disaster, and we can't get that money over to the one department that, in my opinion, it was meant to get to? This is a travesty. And if there is a board member here or listening that has not toured that facility, take the time to do it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, so some of the things to consider when you think about growth over the next 20, 30 years, new programs and services and expanding. You don't want to build the building and then have to build another building. That's an obvious concern if we build it just right size and it fits everything that we have today. So, when you look at 30 to 35,000 square feet, we thought that was a good place to be at. You're going to have, from what Michael and others have been working with us on programs for mental health, drug and alcohol treatment, or drug and alcohol counseling and services to redirect people from the community, disaster and pandemic preparedness. We went through the COVID experience and the pandemic and had virtually zero operating space. If you want to know where all of the equipment, supplies, and the things related to COVID that we had to purchase, acquire, and store, let me know. I'll take you for a tour of where all that's sitting as well. It's not sitting in a storage system. It's not sitting in a storage unit or a storage building, and it's not in the health department. It's sitting in a vacated, unoccupied building that's going to be demolished. So we need to figure out what to do with it.
The former morgue.
Yeah. And you could, yeah, I don't know if you could repurpose it. It's a lot of stainless steel and body coolers. So might. There's, but and you can joke, but there's a lot of uses of spaces that are unconventional that you'll see throughout the county. Operational and storage space is at a premium. They don't have it. They need it. They get supplies, they get PPE, they get sanitizer, the vaccine. We had, the refrigeration systems for the vaccines. We need to be prepared to react to that. I think during the pandemic, we did an incredible job reacting. We weren't prepared a lot of times, but we had a lot of good people that did a lot of good things. So ADA compliance and accessibility is terrible in the building. It's almost non-existent. There's no ADA bathrooms. There's no ADA entrances to the different floors and offices. I was there when they actually purchased the building for $1 million across the street from the hospital. The building cost $1 million. Some of us in here, I don't know, we probably have assets that are worth more than that, but it cost $1 million. They did $200,000 worth of renovations to it at the time, and it involved expanding the bathroom stalls and putting a couple grab handles in. I think that was the extent of the work that was done in the building. You know, so the ADA compliance and accessibility is a challenge. If you ever go, make sure you park in the back and take the stairs down to the basement, lower level to enter the building, which is what we present the public with. There's a front entrance. It's got a covered awning, but you can't park out front. So you'd have to walk around the side or the whole building. But anyway, so ADA and compliance and accessibility is a challenge. There's public service issues with getting people through the building to service counters into the right location. There's no ease of access, I would tell you that. You know, some of the things that we have in the ARP application are statistics, and you have to demonstrate like, why are these things important to the community? And, you know, so these are just some of the statistics that we're putting together to try and show what would be the justification for having space to start a program to deal with substance abuse, addiction, mental health. We don't have the places to put the people to even develop the programs. So if we pursue any of the grants or federal money, state money to develop a program, you have to have places to put people. And I know you've mentioned trailers, you've mentioned maybe rental spaces. Usually those, you know, distance the staff from the office. We did have trailers at the health department at one time. There are a few people here that can tell you how that experience went. They were behind 1330 Highland. So we had trailers out there for, I think, over a decade before we purchased 1240. And the idea was that 1330 on the corner of Highland would be sold and 1240 would be occupied. 1330 became the probation office. So it's court services. But those are just some statistics and numbers. These are the things that are going into the business case. This is kind of further on the same point of what we were talking about. You know, no space to deal with the customers and clients and privacy. The, you know, individual and group counseling or supportive space for anything related to mental health or even a private visit. It's very difficult to find those spaces in the building. We don't have a large space for any operational event, like a vaccination event. We have to rent or we have to find space, borrow space. Interestingly, we were working on that during the pandemic and spent weeks just locating spaces and getting agreements in place. You think it's easy to just step in and use someone else's space. Well, we also have to work through the state's attorney, liability, HR. We have to make sure we have contracts and agreements in place. It doesn't happen quickly because we don't have our own space to operate in. We don't have loading docks at the facility. If you want to bring in supplies for any event, any activity, anything that's going on, there's no place to bring it into a building. You can bring it into the multipurpose building, which is a large garage. It's, I think, roughly 18 miles from the health department, and it's not accessible to the health department without being escorted. So we have a lot of supplies that were put in the multipurpose building and the jail in different locations. The health department staff had to logistically make arrangements to get to their own supplies. That was very difficult. We still have some of that stuff sitting around too. It's very difficult to manage it, to go through it, to remove it. So we're going to be looking at that as well. You know, some of the other things, isolation, if you have, you know, certain types of illnesses, having rooms where you can do the air turns and the air quality control is not something that we have in the buildings. You know, it's just outdated technology everywhere. The HVAC, we replaced, I think, roughly a third of the rooftop units. We still have about 2/3 to go if we want to keep maintaining the rooftop units on the heating and air conditioning. Obviously, we have to do that because we don't have a short-term plan that's going to take care of it before this winter or next summer. And then last, you know, again, just the you know, they have the insufficient capacity for storage. It's just everywhere when we walk through the building. You know, I'm going to finish with some pictures. This is Lake County Health Department. This is the DuPage County Health Department, Will County Health Department, DuPage County Crisis Recovery, this is a new building. McHenry County Health Department, it's in the government center. Okay, this is DeKalb County Health Department, all right? And that's the King County Health Department, okay? Just so you have a point of reference, what other counties around you are looking at. So I'm not, I'm here to help you with planning and trying to understand the circumstances around what, some of your departments and offices deal with. We want to get through this. We're still looking at options. How do you renovate these things? How do you expand them? Do you add stuff? Do you rent space? We are looking at all those things. It's just when you look at how much it costs and you start adding it up, you need to look at it. I think as some of you said, you need to see it side by side. So you understand the numbers and then you understand some of the give and take of doing it. And we're going through that with different offices right now for renovating office space. State's Attorney's Office is occupying a former civil courtroom at Third Street. It is a courtroom, much like this room, and we're going to carve it up so 10 people can sit in it and do their work. But it is a courtroom. We're trying to make that work through the chief judge and State's Attorney Mosser. So those are some of the trade-offs that you try to work through.
And it just to go back to making a decision about use of land. If this board is in agreement that the health department needs to be replaced with a new structure, where are we going to put it? And we have available land to be used. Right now, obviously, it cannot go here because right now literally there's no room, to my knowledge, to build a building here. So we have two choices, two parcels that we can use, which would be the government center, the government judicial center, or
Fabian.
property over at Fabian Parkway. So it was thought that if you make a decision for future use of the government center, we could then make a decision of where we'd be building the potential health department in what location. So if it is the choice of the board to keep this structure here and operate the government center from this campus, then the next obvious choice would be at the judicial center. If it is the choice of the board for future use to sell this property and build a new building, new complex over at Fabian Parkway, then that may be considered to build the health department there on that campus. So that's the determination. Why does it need to be a separate building and not incorporate into a larger building? To my understanding, because they need a separate TB area, a separate entrance, separate room, separate facility to protect the general population from TB. So that's a very special, unique building. It is not the same kind of building that, let's say, court services or finance would need, or energy and environment. It's a unique structure unto itself because of specialization. I'm sorry.
Bates, please. I'm thinking about the mental health services that you talked about, Roger, and I know Mr. Isaacson is here also to maybe help with this question. I feel like we may need to have a better vision for what the health department wants to be and should be before we can answer the question. I don't know if 35,000 square feet is enough.
You're right.
Until we answer, should we be doing mental health? And what are Lake and Kane and McHenry and DuPage and DeKalb doing in those great big buildings? And we even talked about that there are 900 employees working for the Lake County Health Department.
Yeah.
And what in the world are they doing?
So one of the things we have looked at with White and Company is the DuPage Mental Health Center that they're building. They have a crisis center that they're working on. And we were just looking at the diagram of the office and the titles of the people that go into the offices, and looking at it from program area, and then looking at our own self, what do we have in that regard? And it does. Some of these things require the idea and the construction of the program to get a better understanding of how would you implement something like this. Right now, I think for the lack of having people, space, resources, it's difficult to put some of those things on paper. But Michael can speak to that. I think it's just challenging.
This is Director Isaacson from the Health Department, and what Roger said is exactly true. So we're looking for some guidance here. If there's a will from the board to create additional space for us where we can have additional resources, where we can offer more direct services to the public, we can build into that. But there's a cost to even planning that for us. As I've mentioned before in Public Health Committee, and I've spoken to Committee of the Whole before just about the need, and I'm actually appreciative because I know you all see the need for more mental health and substance use services in the community. We're working with the state to look at how can we, once we have space, how can we have something that's sustainable? Because I need to be able to assure every year when we submit a budget to Kathy's office that we have something that we're going to be able to fund going into the future. So we're working with HFS to see what we can build a Medicaid. We're looking at what kind of fee for service we can put in place. But there's certain technical expertise that we would need to bring on board. But if there's not additional space, that would not be a good use of our resources to plan for those things.
Do we have a chicken and an egg problem here? I want to, may I please, when I was talking to my constituents on one of my campaigns, knocking on doors, the need for a more direct, more hands-on mental health help was very apparent. They said some woman said, one of my constituents said she had to take her brother to Kendall County to get the services he needs. That's makes me ashamed.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Silva?
Yes, Ms. Silva, there you are. Hi.
Hi, this is Dr. Silva. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Sometimes I have
Yes,
technical.
you're fine, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I guess I would like to say that I really appreciate the folks who have flagged down for us that we need to involve the community, and also some of Dr. Iqbal's comments. I think they're important to hear, and they're important to address at this point, because we will have to address them to the constituency at some point. So I think our talking about it is very important, and our brainstorming and our looking for solutions is very important. But I think the question at hand that I'm hearing right now is, should we move forward? And I can tell you from my research and just anecdotal evidence of what I've seen, and I'm sure Director will also agree, is that there are so many things down the pipeline as far as mental health is concerned. There are new drugs that are out on the streets that have a potential to kill. Some of them we haven't probably heard much about, and we haven't heard the last about. So, and the ones that we're already dealing with as far as people who have alcohol use disorder and other types of disorders, they're not going to go away. Those issues are still going to be in place, and we're going to be faced with a world or a community or a King County that is going to be greatly affected for many other things to come. So I mean, I've always been a strong proponent of public health, and I just think mental health belongs in public health. And yes, we're going to have to make some very, very strong decisions. But if we don't, we're going to be spending the money one way or another. I'll share real briefly what my father told me when I started having kids and they were young boys, and he says, you're going to spend the money either on education or you're going to spend them on lawyers and other stuff. So take your pick. So that's just my little family story. But I think we're going to spend money, and I think we spend it one way or another, and I'd love to save lives, as many lives as we can. So I'd love to spend it on that end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Silva. Yes,
Just
Roger.
Real quickly, so that we don't have any misunderstanding about the conceptual idea of building a health department and the rough order of magnitude size numbers. It's really to whether you want to initiate a project like that, the programming of the space, the number of people, the sizes of the offices, the types of things, those would all come out in the in-depth programmatic, development of an actual plan. So a lot of these are really rough kind of estimates, and this is from our current architect and planners experience working with the other counties around us, what they do. And like I said, we're looking at plans for things that other counties do, and you're looking at people, job titles on charts, and you're like, well, we don't have those people. Should we have those people? You know, that's the kind of question that you're asking yourself, or will we have those people in the future? Is that where we're headed? And so those are all the types of discussions that we're having. And I think that, you know, if you can get past the idea of whether or not we want to pursue it with, you know, existing funding with ARPA or other funding sources, and then look at that, ultimately, the board is a decision-making, policy-making board. You decide. So-
Now, if I can just make one comment, and maybe Kathy can bring it up. We've had a lot of discussion about funding. And there is a path forward for potentially funding some of this through ARPA money. But then Kathy, do you want to talk about basic use of the property? No, I'm sorry, green, the COVID payroll reimbursement and how that would work? Are you prepared to do that? And just very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, back to the slide that I showed that showed the components of the general fund balance. The COVID payroll account, which is part of the general fund, it represents savings that the county has recognized over the last couple of years because we've had our salaries reimbursed by federal dollars from both the CARES Act grants and the ARPA grants. So the county has savings which can be utilized. An example, and we've been in discussions on this ARPA application that we could use some of our savings to match the ARPA funds because we probably couldn't use 100% ARPA funds, but we could use a substantial portion of ARPA funds to build a new building, and then you could match it with some of our savings.
And that is the same model that DuPage County has been using. So we're not taking this, we're not inventing, inventing something new. We're using other sustained modeling that it's happened from other counties. Yes, Ms. Bates.
I don't know how to say this, but I'd like to ask for a consensus from the group here that we move forward on plans for the health department to find them a new facility.
I think that would be respectable and fine, but we have to decide where. Where do you want to build it?
No, we don't need to decide that first. I don't think respectfully. Okay.
I think everyone understands, but Ms. Juby, yes, please.
So I have a question about something that you had said earlier, that if we decided that we were going to move from here, then the health department would go to Fabian. If we decided we were going to stay here, then the health department could go to the judicial center. I don't understand why that has to be tied to what we do here. I don't
It
understand.
could be later.
That wasn't what was said, though. What was said is
That's not what I said.
if
Yeah.
we stay here, then the health department has to be at the judicial center. And I don't understand that because I don't know why we couldn't build on the land we already have. If we're going to, do something with that building, why we couldn't seek out another building, or why we couldn't build on Fabian separate from anything else we would need to do.
I don't think all of those ideas have been thought out yet, but when you're looking at the health department, one of the questions that we asked Mr. Isaacson was, would it make more sense for you to be at the judicial center campus near the public safety and court side? Or do you need to have, something more administrative, separate on a government kind of campus side? How much degrees of separation do we need for what services they provide? Because the judicial center campus is largely criminal courts, adult justice center, juvenile justice center, coroner. It's some heavy uses on the criminal court side. So do we put, the health department there and the government center there? Do you put the government center at Fabian and the health department at Fabian? So those are some of the policy decisions that need to be ironed out. I think those are not decided, but they need to be if you're going to start to pursue this. We'll start to plan more heavily around, okay, where does it make most sense to put a health department? Does it make sense for the health department to be on the same campus with judicial and criminal courts, or does it make more sense to be administratively with public services, with the government center?
Why can't it be by itself like it is now?
It could be. I think that,
But why are we limiting
It
our
could be.
conversation when we're throwing stuff on the wall to see all these great ideas? Why are we automatically limiting it
we're not.
by saying, well, that's what I heard though?
Oh, that's what, and that's, you are right,
Yeah, we're
Ms.
not.
Gibby, and I'm not arguing, please. You're absolutely right. That is what I said, because I had made, I've talked to people, I'm sure everyone here has talked to people, and it has been asked, why aren't services provided in a more central location for the health department? Because if you're seeking services from Carpentersville to go down to the health department, it's a very long drive. So they've asked if we could have a central location so that the people I have spoken to, and we can obviously do a community survey. Would they prefer that, or would they prefer to have it remain
Good,
in the
good.
Aurora area? But the one thing I think that we all should possibly consider is to make sure that wherever the building is placed, it does have access to public transportation.
And that,
Yeah,
that
but that's
could
not
be
the
part of the
question.
plan.
The question is, why is it tied to what we do with the government center? I don't understand that. No one's been able
that
to
was-
explain that to me. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't absolutely have to be. I think that the question is, do you have synergy with public services and the government people coming to get things? I'll give you an example. In DuPage County, the health department does birth certificates. Ours are done by the clerk. So if you are with your child at the health department, you need a birth certificate, you have to come up here to get your birth certificate or order it online and wait a couple days. So would it make sense to have it here? If you're dealing with someone that has got an issue in the juvenile center, or dealing with problems with a child in the juvenile center, or even an adult justice center in the courts, there's some synergy there if the health department has programs and services that may help that person. So the question is not settled. Maybe it's what is the best answer? We could go back to the idea of the current building. If you renovate it and you were to fix what it is and expand upon it and use there's a large parking lot around it. Okay, so now it's in Aurora. It is definitely at one of the metropoles of the county. So you're all the way south as far as you can get. And anybody in the north end of the county to get to that would be, I'm going to say 45-minute drive.
Well, and I'm not
So,
arguing any of
Those are
that.
things to think about.
I just don't understand why, when we've determined through this conversation that the health department is an urgent need, why we are tying it to something that board members had said are maybe not as urgent with this self-imposed deadline that we've had. And I don't understand why we are tying those together.
I don't think they are.
Well,
Okay.
let's-
So,
Okay,
yeah.
let's not tie them together.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I'm just very, Michael, I don't want you to have perceptions that any of this banter is a reflection of your leadership or what we need, what we do in this room, and we understand what your concerns are and needs are. And I think we stand united in trying to reach. Now, which path we go on that, but thank you for what you do. Roger, thank you. And Kath, getting to know you more, and yay, we got this.
May I raise my question again? Do we have consensus? May we have consensus from the group at hand that we should move forward with the planning for the health department?
No.
And who said no?
Said no. No, yes, Mr. Linder.
I been listening to this, and I think we've sort of talked about it around and around in circles for a while. We really need to empower Mr. Isaacson, their committee, and the department to do a master plan of services before we know what kind of building we need. And I think we need to do it quickly because, obviously we're in a pretty horrid space over there. But I think, this mental health thing could be bigger than the entire health department we have right now if we just determined that we wanted to do the right job. So I really think we need to get moving on a master plan of services for the health department so that we can determine what we really need for them for a facility.
That
Well,
was,
I'm not certain that I really heard that. I said, well, we could do this, we could do that. And I think we need to have an idea what we really need to do. And I think we probably need to do some big things, some broad things.
I think we should ask Ms. Strathman, has that occurred yet? A strategic plan for future services of the health department.
Well, I think Michael knows what we need, and we
Yeah.
haven't had a specific discussion about what the services are, but I think Michael has an idea of what the other counties offer and how we compare to that. and what we'll need going down the road.
And if I can interject before you start, Michael, some of those other counties have better support of those services in the community than we do, certainly in Aurora and Elgin, North Aurora, South Elgin. You know, I think we may have a bigger responsibility than some of those counties do for providing those services.
In transition.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. And I think I can come up with a list. If there's a desire to present a master plan, I think the issue is what's the policy direction from this board in terms of what would you like our health department to be in the future? Because I can look at my neighbors around who are offering many more services for their residents because they have funding to do it. And I'm happy to, we work very hard and I have a fantastic team and I do appreciate the support we have from this board. But every other health department has much better funding. So when you say, well, what's the master plan? I think that's a legitimate question, but I have a master plan based on the less than $2 million that we get from the board every year that we've gotten for the past 12 years because of the freeze. Meanwhile, we've been given raises, healthcare costs have gone up, et cetera. So my master plan is trying to maintain what we're doing. But if I get direction from you to say, hey, we see the needs, what can we grow into? Then I absolutely can provide that. Definitely.
We're here to serve the community. We need to do that rather than serving the bookkeeper. No
Thank you.
offense.
I'd like consensus that we'd like to do that too.
All right, well, you're asking for Ms. Molina. Yes, please.
Madam Chair, Director Isaacson, if you can include in what you're writing, what's actually mandated by the state for the Public Health Department to perform, what services and what services aren't, because I think that's going to have a lot to do with how we decide to fund things and why I think our Public Health Department is the size it is now is because of the funding issue that was attached to it.
Correct. That is accurate. Absolutely accurate. And remember, this is primarily, as was just pointed out, primarily grant funded. So they are robust in achieving grants with only $2 million coming from that general fund. And that's an annual cost, very modest.
Madam Chairman.
Are you ready to call the meeting?
Mr.
I think
Kenyon,
It's about an hour past the time, sir.
do your duty.
I make a motion, we adjourn, go home and think, come back tomorrow.
Tomorrow's another day.
I'll be back with Dale.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you for our audience members